You're such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Mckenna, but today's case is about a suspicious murder on an island called Death Island. Now, a vacation in paradise turned into a nightmare, but not just for one victim. For the last 7 years, horrific things have occurred, but residents of the island have learned better than to say a thing. I also want to thank our sponsor for today's video, which is NordVPN. Now, if you don't know, a VPN is the ultimate way to be safe online, since half of our life is spent scrolling and putting so much information on these devices. So whether you want to make sure you're protecting your data while you're traveling, or if you're at home and you want to access more content, NordVPN can help with both. NordVPN allows you to click on any other location in 60 different countries to access shows and movies on Netflix and so many other sites that aren't currently on your location's Netflix. All the while, you basically get a new IP address so you can choose where you want to appear to be. And that basically puts a wall in between you and anyone trying to get your information. And it's always a good idea to have, especially if you work out and about from your home. But if you want to try it out, go to nordvpn.com/McKenna and use code McKenna, and you will get a 2-year plan plus 4 additional months with a huge discount. So again, go to nordvpn/Brooke Makenna and use code McKenna. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2014 in Thailand, and Hannah Witherridge was a 23-year-old from Norfolk, England, who decided she wanted to go on an adventure. Now, she was known to be this beautiful, fun-loving girl who didn't have a mean bone in her body. She could fill a room with love and happiness just by being there, and her friends and family knew her as this intelligent woman who was giving and supportive and always trying her best. During this time, she had just finished her degree at the University of Essex, and that is when she was itching for an adventure. She started searching online and she found this island in Thailand that she was drawn to. It was actually called Koh Tao, and it meant Turtle Island. But she ended up telling her parents and her family that she was going to be vacationing there with a few friends, and her family was immediately taken aback. They were very worried about her. For whatever reason, they just had this gut instinct that she shouldn't go, and they tried to talk her out of it. I mean, her mother Susan and her father Tony and her sister Laura were all saying, Hannah, please don't go. She was very determined to go to Thailand. So she ended up buying a ticket. She posted on Facebook that she was going, and before they even knew it, she was gone. Hannah had booked a reservation for the Ocean View bungalows right off of Sairee Beach, and she arrived on August 25th of 2014. She kept in constant contact with her family, regardless of having 3 other girls with her, and she was telling her mother Susan of all the fun that she was having. She had gone with her 3 closest friends to this cooking class where they learned how to cook Thai food. She even bought a cooking book there where she could take it home to cook Thai food for her family. She was very excited about this. She appeared to be very happy and just kind of living a peaceful life on this island. She also told her family that she had met up with this group of guys. There was also a group of guys the same age as these girls staying at the same hotel. They thought it was perfect. They all were hanging out constantly, and they loved to hang out on the beach together during the day. But at night, they were hanging out at different bars. There was a whole bunch of local bars right there on the beach. Koh Tao was actually known for its nightlife. They even had what was called a full moon party where they would go all night long, the night of full moons, and be giving out so much alcohol and be celebrating, and it was just craziness with kind of like a rave type atmosphere where people were putting glow-in-the-dark paint on their bodies. They were listening to very loud music. They had the time of their lives at this full moon party, and then every other night they were out drinking and having fun. But on the night of September 15th, Hannah had told her friends that she was going to go out on the beach with the boy that she liked, and that is when they would all say goodbye. It was around 1 to 2 a.m. and they said that she could go ahead and go, and they were going to keep partying there. She never returned back to her bungalow. However, she was found because the next morning around 4 to 5 a.m., so only about 3, 4, 5 hours after she was last seen by her friends, a worker at this hotel ran to her boss, who was still asleep. she was actually mute, so she had to drag him out of his bungalow and to the beach, where she showed him that there was a dead body with blood all over the sand. That's when they found another body floating in the shallow water right near the sand, and this was the body of a man. Now, of course, they called the Thai police immediately, but the problem was a police presence was very uncommon on this island. They had about 6 officers in total for the entire island, and most of the time they weren't out scouring areas for different things happening to arrest different people. They didn't often come to the island at all. Those 6 officers did arrive at the scene. They got to work. They were trying to look at the crime scene. However, they didn't do a good job of cordoning off the area. So everyone going to the beach that day like normal, who had no idea this was a crime scene, began stepping all over the place and all over the possible evidence. Now, this didn't even stop when they saw the blood. Many people were going up to the bodies and taking pictures and just involving themselves in something they should have never been around. The bodies were around 65 feet apart and around 100 feet from the actual hotel. They hadn't gone out and about looking for something they shouldn't have been looking for, or out in an area where it was dangerous. They were right next to the hotel that they were supposed to be safe at, and they had been brutally murdered. Yet no one claimed to have heard a thing. Hannah's autopsy showed that she had been bludgeoned over the head, but she had also been sexually assaulted. The male body found at the crime scene was 24-year-old David Miller, who had been with a group of guys who were also staying at the same hotel as the girls, one of them that they had befriended. Now, David was from a place called Jersey and not New Jersey. It is actually an island that's self-governing off the British Crown dependency, and this is near the coast of France, and so he was kind of used to living on this sort of island. But he was a civil and structural engineer graduate, and he was going on to, get a regular job and be a grown-up, but he wanted to hang out with his friends first. And he was also known to be just the type of guy that would help anyone in need. But he was found in the water where he had been drowned after he had been bludgeoned as well. It was believed that he was bludgeoned, and when he fell into the water, he could no longer get up, and that is how he drowned. He also had scratches on his back, and they were both semi-naked. Basically, their waist down was nude.
Sean Mcganna has been friends with David since they both lived in Leeds. He told me he wanted to make the world a better place.
It was always like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and it was never selfish. It was never for selfish reasons. It wasn't for self-gratification. It was just they wanted to spread this peace and love. Yeah, he was kind of the guy that I always wanted to be.
Hannah's friends gave the Thai police everything they could. They said that they were at the AC bar nearby, and that Hannah did say that she was going out with David that morning at 1 to 2 a.m. and they had gone off together. But officers also found what they believed to be the murder weapon at the scene. This was actually a garden hoe, and it had blood all over it. Next to this garden hoe was also some of the missing clothing from Hannah and David. David's family, when they heard about this, they actually heard about it from the pictures posted all over the media from people invading this crime scene and taking pictures of the dead bodies. And they would come forward to say that the last time that they spoke to David, he said he was the happiest he had ever been there. His family immediately flew out to Thailand as soon as they heard the news, as well as Hannah's father. He was the only one that was able to make it, and so they were all trying to figure out how this happened and who did it, and they were, as soon as they could, going out to help. David's family said that just from what they heard about the crime scene, they believed that David had tried to save Hannah as she was being sexually assaulted, because that is just something that he would do. That was his character, and that he died a hero. Now, media news spread like wildfire due to these British tourists being murdered while on vacation in this paradise that so many would go to. And that is when local residents also blocked the pier in order for the possible killers not to be able to escape. You see, Koh Tao is a very popular tourist location. Thousands go every year to see these beautiful mountains and nature and trails and have a peaceful yet exciting adventure. And I mean, this has such clear, beautiful water, and due to the lack of the police force, you're really free to do whatever you want. This is actually the smallest of the 3 popular tourist locations on the Gulf of Thailand, but it has a population itself of around 7,000, most of which are the Burmese migrant workers who would work at the hotels and at these different bars making money. With over 100 hotels nestled in the mountains and right on the beach, millions would come to visit this very island, none of which knew just how dangerous this wonderful paradise could be, because it was the best kept secret on the island. The police claimed that they had gotten CCTV footage of the very bar Hannah and David had left, and they also had a witness who said that Hannah had gotten into an argument with a man who was an alleged gangster who tried to hit on her, and she denied him. Now, the two did leave around 1-2 a.m., just like the friends had said, and at this point, investigators were looking for this alleged gangster who had sexual jealousy as the heart of the crime. Yet they weren't informing the victims' families of anything, even though they came as quickly as possible. They were just kind of kept in the dark the entire time, and at the same time, authorities were said to be moving very quickly. But it wasn't to really solve the case, it was to make sure that this case could be pushed under the rug so it didn't affect the tourism. At the crime scene, a hair was found in Hannah's hand as though she had tried to fight her way away from the killer and had ended up pulling out a hair strand. There were also cigarette butts scattered around the area, and the garden hoe did have DNA on it. DNA from the garden hoe did reveal that there was DNA of 2 different men thought to be of Asian descent. Now, Thai police took this as meaning that the Burmese migrant workers were to blame for this crime. However, they didn't stop and think that tourists came all the time and they also could be of Asian descent. Now, it's known that the residents of Thailand are not very kind to the Burmese and did not like them being in their country, on their island. They went around, the Thai police, to around 200 of these Burmese workers and got their DNA. And, you know, if anyone denied, they were allegedly throwing boiling water on them until they would give a sample. Now, from the 6 officers they first had, they knew that they needed to get in more officers, and that's when 60 more were brought in from different islands, and this was supposed to be to help, but the residents who would speak up claimed that they were never the ones in control, that it was actually the island's mafia. You see, there was allegedly a mafia which was made up of powerful families on this island who owned the people, the bars, the hotels, the restaurants, and were in full power of what everyone did and said. The first suspect that the Thai police looked into was a man who owned the hotel and was the second person to see the bodies after one of his workers had dragged him out of the bungalow to look at the bodies. They immediately said, you know, he was right there, and he continued to stay there while they looked at the crime scene, and so they started pointing the fingers at him. Now, this was Montrewat Tuvishan, and he said he had nothing to do with the murder. In fact, he had another suspect that he believed was the killer. This was a 25-year-old man named Sean Mcganna. Now, he was not of Asian descent, but the hotel owner said that he had a witness come forward saying that the night of the murders, this Sean Mcganna had blood all over him. So the hotel owner took a cop and started chasing down this Sean and got him into a supermarket where he claimed he had no idea what they were talking about, and he immediately fled the store and continued running from them. It turned out Sean was not from the island at all. He had come to the island with David Miller one of the victims, and had even shared a room with him. Thai police looked at this and saw that it was possibly a crime of passion, but the hotel owner claimed that Sean was not cooperative, and Sean started posting on his Facebook that the local mafia was trying to kill him and he needed help. He was saying that he refused to take blame for these murders he didn't do, and they threatened to kill him and hang him and make it look like a suicide. Sean said that he ran as fast as he could. He knew that they were trying to make him the scapegoat, and if he was dead, it would be easy to say that it was him. So he decided that after he was escorted to the hotel, he was not going to stay there. He knew that they knew where he lived or knew where he was staying, and they were going to come after him. So he ran out into the jungle, where he stayed all night long until the ferry came to take him off the island, and then he was able to escape. He claimed in an interview that the blood he had on him was from a cut from earlier that day. It had nothing to do with the murders, and that they were trying to blame him to just blame someone.
The guy started asking me questions because he knew that I knew the guy who died, and he'd heard my name mentioned. And three of them sat me down and started asking me questions. And I was a bit drunk, so I was answering them. And then they just said to me, it was you who killed them. You've got two people's deaths in your hands. We know it was you. You're gonna hang yourself tonight. You're gonna hang yourself tonight. We're gonna watch you hang. But you died tonight. So I just ran. I just left. I ran.
Do you think they are connected to what happened to David Mcganna?
I think they needed a scapegoat. I think they might know who it was. They don't want it to be locals. They want it to be a Westerner. So if I kill myself here, if I hang myself here, then it's easy to say, I see it was him. Genuinely thought that was me dead. I was gone. I thought I phoned my mum. Phoned my sister.
Now, 2 weeks after the murders, two men were actually arrested for the murders. This was on October 1st, and it was Phyo and Zha Lin, who were both 21 years old. They had been seen on CCTV footage near the crime scene riding their scooter away around the time of the murder, and they both admitted that they were on Sairi Beach, the same beach where the murders occurred. Now, there was another man with them called Ming or Mong, and he was immediately released upon being brought in for questioning. They were all a part of the Burmese migrant workers who worked at the hotel, and the two who were still in custody were being held on immigration charges, whereas Mong did not have those charges to be held on. However, neither of these two had a criminal record, yet while in custody, Thai police said that they did confess, and then they had one of them reenact the murders while being filmed. They said that they were driven by a sexual desire to assault Hannah after seeing her and David kissing on the beach. Thai police claim that the DNA that they had found at the scene did match both of these men, and so this was the end of the case. Right? No, not even close, because when Wei's father went to talk to them while they were in custody, they ended up saying that they had been threatened and that they were going to be killed if they didn't confess. They claimed that the Thai police said that they would douse them in petrol or gas and set them ablaze, or they would dismember them and put them in the ocean, or they would put them in a tire and literally set them on fire, and that they had been tortured while in custody, where they were naked, they were kept in freezing cold rooms, they were sexually assaulted, and they were having pictures taken of them, they were tased on their sensitive areas, and they were beaten continuously. Now, this was not hard to believe, as many knew that the Thai police were known for the aggressive methods in which they went about things. Wei and Zha claimed that they wanted to retract their confessions because they had only made them under duress, and that the only reason they said they would have anything to do with these murders is because they were told that they could get only 2 years for the murders if they confessed. Yet David's phone, one of the victims, was found at one of these men's homes. He said he found it at the beach, and then it was found that it was also reported that this phone had been given to Thai police from a friend of David's. These two suspects were then brought back to the same Witherridge beach to reenact how they committed the murders in front of the public. Before the trial, the defense asked for the evidence to be resubmitted and re-examined. However, the police lieutenant, Colonel Somak Narad, admitted that it had been lost. The only evidence remaining was the garden hoe. So they said that, they had documented the test that they had already done, didn't find it necessary to keep it, and now they had no idea where it was. The defense were saying that they were concerned that the Thai police didn't know what they were doing when they were doing these DNA tests, that they weren't ever trained for a DNA testing kit. The police hadn't even tested the blood in the sand or evidence on Hannah and David's clothing. And so evidence was then sent to one of Thailand's top forensic scientists, where they found that the DNA was seriously flawed and that on the hoe was not believed to match the suspects. Thailand's National Human Rights Commission then intervened on this case because they believed that these suspects had been tortured, and they attempted to investigate, only to receive a lot of backlash. This was from the Thai police, who refused to show up at 4 different scheduled meetings, and a British police team even went down to Thailand to investigate, and a human rights activist talked to the suspects in prison and heard them say that the police had coerced them into confessing. Now, the defense were allowed to talk to the men, but only for 30 minutes before the trial, and they were having a very hard time finding anyone in the area to testify because everyone was so scared to speak up. But on July 8th of 2015, the trial did begin, and no one knows exactly what was said because the judge actually denied permission to take any notes. But there was no jury, so the 3 judges would make the final decision, and on December 24th, they were found guilty and sentenced to death. Yet even though many refused to publicly criticize this, many did believe that these 2 men were scapegoats. And some were quite vocal about this, including the boys' mothers, who were devastated and saying that this was not in their sons' characters, that they would not have done this, and they believed they were innocent. Now, the infamous Anonymous also made a video about this, where they hacked the Thai police department, crashed it, because they believed they were innocent as well. But it turned out that this was not the first murder on the island, especially not of tourists. You see, 2 years prior to their murders, a man named Ben Harrington died in a motorcycle accident, or so his mother was told. You see, he was 32 years old, he was an IT consultant, he was on vacation with his brother and a friend, and he actually went to see another friend who worked at a beach on Witherridge Beach. And that night of August 30th, he was out on his motorcycle when he would crash into an electricity pylon. Now, the Thai police immediately wanted to cremate him, but his parents fought against this. His watch and his wallet were never found. His mother, Pat, was told later on that a lot of the times tripwires would be put up so they could get people off their motorcycles in order to rob them. Now, Pat has created a petition in order to help the British investigators go over to Thailand and investigate the deaths into the British tourists, and I'll have that linked below. Then, only 8 months prior to Hannah and David's murder, the Pearson family went on a family vacation to Koh Tao for New Year's Eve, and this was mom and dad, Tracy and Graham, and then their grown son, who was 25-year-old Nick. They were all going to Koh Tao because their other son, who was named Matt, was working on the island. They wanted to visit him. But on New Year's Eve night, Nick had drank a little too much, and he also had an infected knee, so his father Graham kind of walked him back to his bungalow, watched him get into bed. He was completely fine, and then he went back to the party. But the next morning he didn't answer his door, and his key was still inside, and they found him the next day and claimed that he had fallen 50 feet from his bungalow into the water and drowned. Now, he had injuries to his head, limbs, and face, and still had dried blood on his body, even though it was said he had drowned in this water. The coroner claimed that there was not enough evidence to say how or when he died, but his mother Tracy had a gut feeling he was murdered. They believed that someone had followed him back to his bungalow because they couldn't believe that he had gone out swimming on his own after being put into bed, and the view from his bungalow wasn't just straight down water. There was a whole bunch of rocks and stairs and different paths you had to go to, and then it was a 50 feet drop to the water. So he would have had a lot more injuries and broken bones, which he did not have, if he would have actually stumbled down all this way and fallen into the water. This was on the same exact beach that Hannah and David would later be found, and after Nick's death, his brother Matt, who worked on the island, was actually fired from his teaching job because he was taking too long to grieve, even though it had been 3 months. Now, Hannah and David were then murdered at this time, and while Thai police searched for a killer, another body was found only 2 months later. This was 44-year-old Hans Peter Sutter, who went missing for 10 days, and then his body was found when it washed ashore on November 18th. His autopsy stated he had drowned as well, even though he was a regular snorkeler, and there's a lot of mysterious things around his case as well. But in January, another 2 months later, a 29-year-old named Dmitry Poves went to a bar on New Year's Eve of 2015, only to end up in his bungalow alone. Now, the next morning, January 1st, he was found hanging from the ceiling in his bungalow that he had rented. His neck was very bruised from the rope, and there was no signs of a fight or a struggle. But there was also a note in his bed in French that said, "Iris, I love you. Suicide seems easy, but it is actually difficult." Everybody thought, okay, this is definitely a suicide. So then why and how were his hands tied behind his back with a black string while he was hanging? Just 20 days later, a 23-year-old named Christina Ansley was visiting the island on a backpacking trip where she was going to a whole bunch of different places. She was known as this bubbly, intelligent girl who everybody liked. She was known to have nobody speak bad about her. She spoke bad about nobody, yet she died in her room, and her body was then left in the temple for days with nothing being done to it. You see, Christina's family was then told that her death was due to mixing antibiotics as well as alcohol, and her family did know she was taking antibiotics for a chest infection, but believed that this was foul play and that she wouldn't have been able to take so much alcohol that it would have killed her. They had been trying to contact her for 24 hours prior to that, asking if she was okay, not knowing she was already dead. Christina's family believes that this was done by a serial killer family that remains free to rape and murder on the island. After doing investigations of their own, Christina's family found that there was secret CCTV footage being held, as well as a mysterious Swedish man who possibly had something to do with it, and the blood samples were also inconclusive and no toxicology report was ever created. Christina was also said to have been warned about investigating the strange murders happening on the island. Eventually, they did find what this CCTV footage was, and it was a man leaving her bedroom around 6 a.m. that morning. Now, police knew who he was, named him in the report, and yet didn't talk to him at all. So her father actually put this in on Facebook, found him, called him, and asked him what he knew. After talking to him, they believed he was being straightforward, he had nothing to do with it, but that left them with so many questions. The next month, a 23-year-old named Valentina Nova vanished from a hostel. Now, inside of her room, she had left behind her phone, passport, and camera, and CCTV footage caught her walking to the bay and not coming back. Many said she was trying to beat a record that they had under the water, but she has never been found since. And then nearly a year later, on January 8th of 2016, Luke Miller was found at the bottom of the hotel swimming pool on Syrie Beach, and he was on holiday with a friend. He was out drinking the night prior, and his mother claims that there are far too many inconsistencies in the police reports. They also found hand-sized bruises on his shoulders, and the Thai police said that's simply because he struck the diving board while jumping. Another year later, in April of 2017, 2017, a 30-year-old named Elise Dalamage was a Belgian backpacker who was at a yoga retreat when she made her way to Koh Tao. And she checked into the hotel, but she was said to use a different name. She didn't want to show her passport. And it was said that she left the hotel the same day she checked in because there was a mysterious fire that occurred. Basically, 3 of these bungalows had caught on fire, and so she went into the jungle to get away from this. She then found her way to a different hotel. It was the Poseidon Resort. She checked in there. She also bought a ticket to leave on April 24th, and her bags did make it to the ferry and to her destination, but she never did. A week later, she was found hanging among the rocks in the jungle, and the police at first believed that it was the missing woman I told you about before, Valentina, who had never been found, but Elise's body had been found in the jungle, half eaten by lizards, burnt, and partially wrapped in t-shirts. Thai police ruled her death a suicide. No note was ever found, and this was one of the strangest cases they had ever had, but Thai police and authorities have been under scrutiny due to all of the media attention surrounding these deaths and how they deal with them, so much so that the tourism has been affected. And that's when they decided they needed to clarify the details of the investigations over the years. In fact, they reopened Elise's case. Now, they talked to 14 witnesses and have more scheduled. They said they found no drugs in her system that would cause a death, but she was suffocated. And really nothing about Elise's case has changed since they reopened it. They still rule it as a suicide. But the Thai police did take that time to clear their name, as well as call out those who were pointing to the mafia gang on the island. The acting police chief even said, "Some news reports pointed to a mafia gang, but I assure you, after cooperating with the governor, military, and police who have taken part in maintaining order here, there is no such gang on the island, nor are there conflicts of interest. If anyone has proof to the contrary, please contact the governor or me." They even started saying that many were taking legal action against the news outlets who were spreading these rumors. Unfortunately, the strange deaths don't stop there though, because in 2018, a man named Bernard Grotesque returned to the island that he had lived on for 26 years to tie up some loose ends. He had left because he was tired of the corruption and the hostility toward foreign business owners there. They had a home deep in the jungle, but they had since moved. And when he returned in March of 2018, he was found deceased in his home. Now, no autopsy report was given, but Thai police claim that it was either heart failure or a snake bite. His family has been begging for his body to be returned to Germany, but have gotten nowhere with authorities. The Prime Minister has said about all of these deaths, they think our country is beautiful and safe, and they can do whatever they like, wear bikinis wherever they like. I'm asking, if they wear bikinis in Thailand, will they be safe? Only if they are not beautiful. He later apologized for this, claiming that he was just trying to say that you can't live the same way in this country as you do in your own country. You need to be more safe. And he also admitted that in the past there was a mafia that preyed and took advantage on the tourists, but there are none anymore. Yet in June of 2018, there was a woman who did not want to be named. She was a British woman who had gone to the island with a group of male friends, and on June 26th, around midnight, they were at the bar. They were having drinks when her and a friend named Martin, who had come with her, ordered some drinks. They started to feel a little woozy, and so they headed out to the beach, where they passed out for the night. When she woke up the next morning, she no longer had pants on, and she had also been robbed of her cell phone, cash, wallet, credit cards. But the worst thing was she immediately knew she'd been sexually assaulted, and she then saw a man who was watching her, who, when they made eye contact, he immediately fled. She ran back to the hotel. Martin showed up eventually because he had been out this whole time as well. And when she told the men she was with what happened, they immediately took her shirt to keep for evidence, and they were trying to get her to go to the police there. Now, the hotel manager also told her to report it to the Thai police, but she wanted to leave. She didn't feel safe on that island, so they got on a ferry and went over to the next island, where she finally, went and filed charges for robbery and rape. And she was then told that they could not do the charges of rape there, only the robbery, that she would have to go back to Koh Tao. She could not do that, but her friend Martin did take the shirt and went back for her. He begged the Thai police to test the shirt for DNA evidence, and they said that the victim could only file the report. But once this woman went back to England, told her story to the news, Thailand officers began saying that she created this whole story to make sure that it didn't get out to her boyfriend that she'd had an affair. After getting much backlash, the Thai police did fly out to get the shirt from her and tested it. They claimed it had no semen, but it did have DNA that compared to 20 men on the island, but no exact match. They claimed that they talked to 200 witnesses, though, and that nobody could corroborate her story. 5 months later, a body was found in the sea and was ruled as a drowning once again. This was 33-year-old Alexander Bushman, who had left his phone, clothes, hotel keys, shoes, and ID at a local diving shop. His hotel room showed no signs of robbery or an attack, and the Thai police claimed there was no signs of foul play. Now, the odd deaths continued from there, and parents of the victims began speaking out about the corruption of authorities in Thailand and warning tourists to not go to this island. Even residents have admitted to turning a blind eye to sketchy things happening in order to not become involved. Zalin and Phyo, the two suspects who were convicted of murder, sentenced to death, have appealed their convictions, but this was denied by the Supreme Court in 2019. However, the next year, in 2020, the Thai king wanted to show his clemency on his birthday, and that is when he decided that these two would have their sentences changed from death to life. Now, the only request was that they would need to admit to the murders that they had been denying. Both of these men were thought to admit, so their sentences were changed, and David's family openly accepted this, saying that they didn't believe in the death penalty, that they were okay with it changing from death to life, and that the truth was finally revealed, and that was all they wanted. However, the boys' lawyers said that they never admitted their guilt to even get their sentence changed. They continually say they're innocent. However, Hannah's family strongly believed that these two men were the scapegoats, that they were just a means of covering this up and shooing it off and closing the case, and that the case has never been solved. They have strongly spoken out about this on social media. Hannah's sister Laura often wrote about it on Facebook, and she even supported the anonymous video that was created about these two boys' innocence. Now, Laura ended up passing away at 30 years old in 2019 due to complications while she was 9 months pregnant. Now, no one knows the exact cause of her death. Many like to speculate, oh, maybe they had something to do with it, the Thai police. However, she had been in treatment for many different things. She had a complex medical history for years, and it was just something that had unfortunately occurred. But this poor family not only had to deal with one daughter's death, but two. Now, you may think, well, it's been 3 years since a murder had occurred, so it could be safe to go to this island now, right? Just in June of 2021, 2 more bodies were found. This was 59-year-old Rakeshwar Sachthamakkul, I'm so sorry, and his wife, 54-year-old Anshu, who had taken a vacation with their adult son when he ended up finding them deceased at the bottom of the hotel swimming pool. Police claim there was no sign of a struggle. Conveniently, the CCTV footage or the camera pointing to that area was not working, and their death was ruled as drownings. These 2 people were successful CEOs and had been married for 37 years. That means there was at least 13 suspicious deaths of tourists over the last 7 years. So do you believe this was just odd coincidences or something way more sinister? Is there a serial killer family on this island, possibly the mafia, or are these just accidents of people who are outside of their comfort zones, possibly drinking, letting loose on vacation, not knowing what they're doing in a different country, and fall into these horrific accidents? Of course, that is without Hannah and David's murders that were obviously murders. But the ones that are, just strange deaths, could it have just been accidents that are caused from people not being the most careful while on vacation? Or do you believe that these are all connected? Do you think this is an island of secrets and cover-ups, or is this just where the police lack experience and have no business conducting these cases? It's hard to know, because for me, yes, it can be something that looks like such a crazy conspiracy theory that is happening here, but at the same time, these could be drownings. This is a vacation where you go out into the water a lot, but just the amount of people who have died is a lot. However, if there's millions of people coming to this island, not a ton. Not that these lives don't matter, they matter very much, but if you look at the, amount of tourists versus the amount of deaths, is it really that crazy? I'm not sure. I would love to hear all of your theories on this. If you believe they're all connected, if you believe that Hannah and David were killed by those two men who are in jail for the rest of their lives or not. I just hope that things die down, not for the tourists to go back there, but for the people who are having these vacations, supposed to have a good time, to not be so fearful for their lives and to not have lost their lives. So please choose carefully when you are choosing a vacation site. Do your research beforehand. Always be careful, be on guard. Don't just let loose in a place you don't know. Even in a place you do know, always be cautious. Always have the upper hand. Always be in your right mind as much as you can be, even if that means you have a little less fun. But don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. If you want to watch my last video, it will be right here. If you want to watch a playlist of my videos, it will be right here. Don't forget to subscribe. Okay, bye.